Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Happy Friday, everybody. Weekend is almost upon us. First up, I just wanted to quickly say that, as some of you have probably noticed, today the channel China Update reached 20,000 subscribers. This is quite the milestone. Frankly, it is an incredible feeling. I never anticipated the channel to grow to this size, and it continues to grow. It has been an absolute pleasure and honor to be able to put these videos together for you guys every day. I want to express to everybody deep appreciation and thanks for all the support. You guys have been tremendously supportive of the channel for months and in some cases years. So thank you very much. I hope we can continue growing together, and I hope that I can continue to create videos that you all get some value from. Thank you very much, everybody. And one further piece of housekeeping, there'll be no episode tomorrow on Saturday or during the weekend generally, but I will be back on Monday with regular episodes. Okay, first up. Yesterday, Thursday, General Secretary Xi Jinping left the mainland for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic and arrived in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, part of a 2-day visit to mark the 25th anniversary of the handover of Hong Kong from the United Kingdom to the People's Republic of China. In a brief arrival speech, Xi described Hong Kong as, quote, having risen from the ashes, end quote, of overcoming, quote, various severe challenges, end quote. He was, of course, referring to the months-long large-scale protests of 2019, largely fueled by public anxiety over mainland political encroachment on Hong Kong's autonomy, as well as underlying economic concerns. By overcoming, the General Secretary is likely referring in part to the controversial national security law passed the following year, which, among other things, curtailed freedoms of speech, assembly and press, justified in the name of social order and, as the name suggests, national security. Xi did not spend the night in Hong Kong. He returned to Shenzhen in the mainland. Xi Jinping then returned to the city again today, Friday, July the 1st, to officiate the swearing-in ceremony of the city's new administration, headed by John Lee. Then, once again, returned to the mainland soon after noon. About 1,300 guests joined the ceremony at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre. A very substantial security presence was likely relieved to see the General Secretary return to the mainland side of the border. Xi's red carpet arrival included a brass band, traditional lion dances, and vetted crowds chanting and waving flags. During his Friday speech today, Xi directed Hong Kong officials to, quote, change their governance philosophy and better grasp the relations between the government and the market, end quote, and called for bigger and more affordable housing in the city. Xi concluded his speech by expressing that he believes that Hong Kong will make greater achievements in the rejuvenation of the Chinese race. Speaking to local media after his swearing-in, John Lee, the city's new chief executive, expressed, quote, we won't let President Xi down, end quote. Meanwhile, on his way to Hong Kong, the General Secretary stopped off in Wuhan to give a speech on the correctness of the dynamic zero-COVID policy. The other main theme of Xi's Wuhan tour was self-reliance, and a new term, development independence, was introduced in Xi's speech. The General Secretary visited factories involved in semiconductors, as well as optoelectronics, expressing, quote, with the development and growth of our country, breaking through choke point key core technologies cannot be delayed. We must adhere to the problem orientation, give full play to the advantages of the new national system, work hard to catch up, and accelerate the realization of scientific and technological self-reliance. End quote. Analysts are debating the significance of this development. Quote, perhaps another worrisome sign of where he thinks things are headed with the West, and especially the United States. I assume that all the tech firms lobbying the US government to loosen or not impose restrictions on their sales to the PRC are doing so with the full knowledge that Xi wants to replace them all, and so are just thinking they should squeeze as much revenue out of the PRC as they can before they are replaced. Or do they think the PRC will never be able to replace them? Or, if they can, it will be under a successor CEO's watch. End quote. Interestingly, the state media readout of Xi's comments from his Wuhan trip included the line, quote, "We will strive for a relatively good performance in the year's economic development," end quote, which some analysts argue indicates that Xi himself is conceding that China, even with massive stimulus as we have seen, will not achieve its 5.5% growth rate, a bad sign for markets and investors. Quote, Xi Jinping's comments in Wuhan suggest that China's top leadership sees COVID as a legitimate reason to miss the economic growth objectives and that China's overall COVID stance is unlikely to change anytime soon. In turn, that means that new outbreaks will continue to pose serious risks to the economy and that economic sentiment will continue to be affected. End quote. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit the like button, and for anyone who wants to do the extra mile and help keep this channel sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you, as always, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, NATO. NATO has issued its updated strategic concept with a significant shift in its view towards China, describing the country as a systemic challenge to Euro-Atlantic security. The alliance's previous document, issued in 2010, made no mention of China. Though unsurprising, we have been anticipating this for a few weeks and it was signalled during the G7, this shift is a big deal. Beijing's decision to side with Russia over its invasion of Ukraine pushed many European member states towards supporting the East Asian rebalancing of NATO's strategy. After the strategy was adopted at the NATO summit in Madrid, NATO's Secretary-General told media, quote, China does not share our values, and like Russia, is working on undermining our values, end quote. Beijing, of course, is not happy. Yesterday, China's mission to the EU said in a statement, quote, NATO's so-called strategic concept, filled with Cold War thinking and ideological bias, is maliciously attacking and smearing China. We firmly oppose it, end quote. And how can an Asia-Pacific China pose any challenge to the security of a North Atlantic military alliance? In fact, it's the other way round. It's NATO that dropped bombs on a Chinese embassy. Beijing also doubled down too on its position that the US is primarily responsible for the Ukraine war, not Russia. Quote, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict has taken a heavy toll on Europe politically, economically, and socially. As the one who started the Ukraine crisis and the biggest factor fueling it, the US needs to reflect on its disreputable role it has played in the Ukraine crisis and stop smearing China. End quote. The non-Euro-Atlantic states of Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand were invited to the NATO summit too. Japanese Prime Minister Kishida called for a significant upgrade of his country's ties with NATO, expressing, according to Japanese Foreign Ministry officials, that security in Europe couldn't be separated from that of the Indo-Pacific. Seoul announced that South Korea will establish a diplomatic mission at NATO headquarters. Australia's Prime Minister told NATO leaders that China aimed to become the, quote, most powerful nation in the world, end quote, and that the strengthening of relations between Beijing and Moscow posed a risk to all democratic nations. In a rare example of a New Zealand leader openly criticizing China, Prime Minister Ardern warned that Beijing is becoming increasingly assertive and more willing to challenge international norms. She was also critical of China's human rights record. Okay everybody, that is today's episode of China Update. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you on Monday.